Coming up,
I've broken some rules to make this. Carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
You don't move fast and break things if the thing you're going to break has got you inside it.
not what we thought. A year on from the Titan tragedy,
We knew right where the sub was.
James Cameron reveals
Tapping sounds. Tapping sounds are ridiculous.
what really happened at the bottom of the ocean.
The entire world waiting with bated breath. We all knew they were dead.
So the Coast Guard lied. That's next on 60 Minutes. If there's one small comfort to be taken from the OceanGate deep-sea submersible disaster, it's that death was instant for the 5 occupants on board. But a year on from the tragedy, there are still so many unanswered questions, like why the strange-looking craft on a mission to the wreck of the Titanic catastrophically imploded, and why, for days on end, was the world led to believe there was hope for a successful rescue mission. The lack of credible information about what really happened is now becoming increasingly unfathomable, not only for other undersea explorers like Hollywood icon James Cameron, but also for the families of the victims.
It's in my home, but it's in a box because I don't want to see it every day because it's make me remember this bad moment.
It might not look like much, but this shriveled styrofoam cup holds more meaning than most of us can fathom. For Sidonie Nargeolet, it's a treasured trophy, the only remaining evidence of her father's final adventure to the wreck of the Titanic. It must be so special for you to have that cup.
Yeah, it's very special because it was with my dad to his last moment. So, yeah, it's very special.
An avid deep-sea explorer, Paul-Henri Nargeolet made a habit of taking decorated styrofoam cups on his missions to see them shrink under the pressure of descent. Remarkably, this one somehow survived the catastrophic implosion of the Titan, OceanGate's experimental submersible.
The all-out search for a missing submersible with 5 people on board leads to a tragic discovery, and there are no survivors.
1 year on, Sidonie is still desperate for answers, but she's never heard from OceanGate. They still haven't contacted you to give condolences or explain what happened?
Nothing from them. No condolences, no we are sorry, nothing.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
These guys broke the rules. It's that simple. They should not have been legally allowed to carry passengers.
James Cameron is furious too. His friend, Sidonie's dad, Paul-Henri, should be alive today.
I got him and he got me.
Tonight, the legendary film director and Titanic expert is ready to set the record straight on the frenzied search mission.
Running all over the surface, the entire world, waiting with bated breath, talking about 96 hours of oxygen. We all knew they were dead.
And why, despite 5 active investigations, the world is still waiting for answers.
I think they went by a procedure that was torturous for the family.
Seeing her coming out of the darkness like a ghost ship still gets me every time.
James Cameron's knowledge of the deep goes far beyond his Oscar-winning picture.
Are you ready to go back to Titanic?
He's visited the Titanic wreck site 33 times and designed and piloted a submarine to the deepest known point on Earth.
I'm at the trench wall. I am working a steep rock cliff, over.
You've spent more time at the Titanic wreck than the actual captain spent on the ship.
Yeah, if you do the math, it actually is true.
Given his credentials, you'd think he'd be an obvious choice for investigators looking for expert advice on the Titan's ill-fated dive. And yet, Jim is still waiting for a phone call.
What are you hearing about where the investigation is up to?
I've made myself available. I've volunteered to the investigative committee at the Coast Guard. Nothing.
They haven't interviewed you?
I think they want to do things their way. And frankly, I think they've kind of got egg on their face, and they don't want outside opinions. That's just my interpretation.
It's a stunning claim from one of the world's leading experts in deep-sea exploration.
That was, almost a year ago, so
That's astonishing to me.
why listen to a scientist?
We've taken a completely new approach to the sub design, and it's all run with this game controller and these touch screens. So if you want to go forward, you press forward. If you want to go back, you go back, turn left, turn right, go down, go up.
OceanGate's maverick CEO, Stockton Rush, pushed the limits of sense and safety while promising passengers an unforgettable adventure.
OceanGate Expeditions offers you the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be a specially trained crew member safely diving to the Titanic wreckage site.
The corporate video might sound enticing, but in reality, the Titan was an untested outlier. The only commercial submersible in the world with a hull made from carbon fibre composite, which industry experts agree is incapable of withstanding extreme deep-sea pressure. As a result, the sub wasn't classed or certified.
You're remembered for the rules you break. And, I've broken some rules to make this. Carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
He seemed to take a real pride in his unconventional approach, in breaking the rules.
Exactly, and I think this is a place where you've got to really know your stuff before you can step outside the box. You don't move fast and break things, as they say in Silicon Valley, if the thing you're going to break has got you inside it, along with other innocent people who believe your line of BS.
On June 18 last year, Stockton Rush set off for the most famous shipwreck on Earth, with Paul-Henri Nargeolet as guide, and 3 paying passengers: billionaire explorer Hamish Harding, Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood, and his teenage son Suleiman. But less than 2 hours into the dive on that Sunday, communication stopped and a media storm began.
Rescuers are racing to find the missing dive vessel.
But the U.S. Coast Guard is not letting up.
Well, we received a call in Boston the afternoon of the 18th. They had put a submersible down on the side of the Titanic, and they had lost communications earlier that day.
Captain Jamie Frederick knew right away the US Coast Guard was facing an unprecedented challenge.
And had you ever received a call of that nature before?
No, it was certainly anomalous. In fact, I've been in the Coast Guard for just about 30 years, and I've never dealt with a subsurface search. It was challenging.
For the families of those on board, it was an unbearable weight, with only one thing keeping them going: hope.
With all the boats that came, all the people involved for looking for them, I really had hope. I really thought they could find them.
And find them alive?
Yes, of course, I was thinking they would find them alive.
And for a couple of days there, a miracle seemed possible. Eerie echoes of banging noises, picked up by sonar equipment, lit a fuse under the search for the sub, painting a haunting picture of the 5 men trapped inside at the bottom of the ocean.
It just made such a beautiful media circus, to talk about a race against time, these poor people, tapping sounds. Tapping sounds, ridiculous.
James Cameron wasn't surprised at all when US Navy analysis found the banging noises weren't human and were most likely from the ocean or ships in the area.
They're hearing a little crescent wrench or something tapping against a hull over the sound of 11 ships operating in the immediate vicinity, moving giant pieces of deck equipment around.
Not possible.
That's like, hearing a sparrow fart over the cacophony of an airport.
So that whole thing was
maybe a
fiction.
metaphor you'll want to cut out.
That's a great metaphor, but you're saying that whole thing was fiction.
Well, we knew, my jaw literally dropped open farther and farther each day that they never cautioned everybody.
Coming up, the incredible rescue plans.
Once we connected to them, they were coming up.
And why the entire frenzy was pointless. Because, as you'll see, there was one critical piece of information the Coast Guard didn't share.
9:25, confirmed implosion. And I literally wrote that on the pad the moment I heard from my naval source.
So the Coast Guard lied.
The saga of the missing Titan submersible had all the makings of a Hollywood movie. Billionaire explorers missing on their way to the graveyard of a ship once thought to be unsinkable, with the clock ticking, oxygen running out, and the world watching.
I knew that this was going to be a big story.
Ed Cassano was ready to play the hero. His remotely operated deep-sea vehicle, the Odysseus 6, was the only submersible that would make it nearly 4 kilometres down to the Titanic site, and quickly.
Did you at that point truly believe this was a rescue mission?
Absolutely.
4 days after the sub disappeared, and spurred on by reports of banging noises, Odysseus 6 descended through the cold, cruel depths of the North Atlantic Ocean, with an incredible mission to tow the men to safety.
The plan that we had, once we plugged into the scene, was we would go to seafloor, we were rigged for heavy lift, we were going to connect onto the Titan submersible. Once we connected to them, they were coming up.
It would have been a miraculous survival story, but James Cameron says it was always fiction. Tonight revealing for the first time the moment he knew the Titan had suffered a catastrophic implosion.
I just found this in my file. It says, this is on Casa del Mar Stationery. That's the hotel I was in LA at the time that I heard about it. 9:25, that's AM, 9:25, confirmed implosion. And I literally wrote that on the pad the moment I heard from my naval source, very reliable source, that they had heard an event and triangulated it to the site.
That US naval intelligence of an implosion near the Titanic wreck site came just hours after the Titan set off. For James Cameron, it was a deeply personal tragedy. His good friend and fellow Titanic buff, P.H. Nagiale, was on board.
I had a silent moment because I knew PH very well. And P.H. is how we'd say it because he's French, right? It was a somber moment. And then it just transformed into this crazy thing. Everybody running around with their hair on fire when we knew right where the sub was. But nobody could admit that they didn't have the means to go down and look. So they were running all over the surface, and the entire world, waiting with bated breath, talking about 96 hours of oxygen. We all knew they were dead. We'd already hoisted a glass, a toast to our fallen comrades on Monday night.
So the Coast Guard lied?
I don't think they lied. I think they went by a procedure that was torturous for the family.
Unnecessarily?
Unnecessarily torturous for the family. I don't think they lied. They just didn't disclose. They were informed by naval intelligence that an implosion event was tracked to the coordinate of the Titanic wreck site. Now, could it have been something else? 1 in a trillion.
But the Coast Guard insists that information was inconclusive. As far as Captain Jamie Frederick is concerned, a rescue mission doesn't become a recovery mission until there's tangible evidence.
Had you had at that early stage reports of naval intelligence of an implosion at the Titanic wreck site that day? Had you heard those reports?
We received the information from the Navy very early on that they had detected an anomaly in the vicinity of the site of the Titanic. But at the time, that information was at a classified level that couldn't be shared publicly. And it also was not definitive. And frankly, in the business of search and rescue, absent definitive information, we have a moral responsibility and a statutory responsibility, frankly, to continue to search.
So did you genuinely feel hope that this was still potentially a rescue operation.
If there's one thing that I've learned in 30 years of doing search and rescue, if you don't have hope and you're conducting a search and rescue case, you're in the wrong business, because I have seen some pretty remarkable things happen over my career.
But this time, it wasn't to be. Ed Cassano will never forget the moment his remotely operated vehicle, the Odysseus 6, spotted debris on the sea floor.
It was quiet, I remember, and you know, it felt like immediately there was an answer with what we were addressing. I would say in general the feeling was professional but profound. It was obvious that what we were dealing with was a recovery, not a rescue.
Sidonie Nargilé had been desperately clinging to hope that her father, PH, could be found alive.
When you learned there had been a huge implosion, how did that make you reflect on the search? That in fact, you know, they likely had been dead for days.
I don't really know what to think about it because, in a way, this church... Sorry.
No, take your time. Take your time.
Yeah, in a way, I had hope for days more, you know, about him being alive. So, in a way, it's more difficult because it's hope for nothing. But in a way, I thought during 4 days he was still alive.
It's a sad irony for Sidonie that her father's obsession with the Titanic's watery graveyard would ultimately claim his life.
My dad could spend all day long talking about the Titanic, so he really loved that.
He was Mr. Titanic to many people.
Yes, Mr. Titanic.
PH's 38th dive to the wreckage, alongside OceanGate boss Stockton Rush, would be his last.
It never made sense to me how someone with so much experience would agree to dive with OceanGate knowing the risks.
That's a tricky area for me.
Yeah.
But I have to remind myself that PH wasn't an engineer per se. He was an explorer at heart. I also know his heart, which was to go, which was to dive.
Do you expect there'll be charges? Should someone be prosecuted?
I think that there should be some changes. They didn't have classification. Theoretically, they should not have been legally allowed to carry passengers.
This is an experimental sub. This is a dangerous environment.
Is this a case of the person who should be prosecuted is, in fact, already dead?
Yeah, I think the tragedy is he took others with him. He should have listened to the warnings. But don't we say that about the captain of Titanic?
James Cameron is now channeling his outrage at OceanGate and the investigation into a new deep-sea mission, vowing to return to the Titanic in honour of his dear friend, and to make sure Stockton Rush's failed experiment is relegated to the history books.
Exploration will proceed because it must, and because it's part of the human spirit, right? And, you know, a knucklehead that made a mistake shouldn't be holding everybody else back, and it won't, right? We have plans to build a sub that can go to 4,000 meters, and we will.
Wow.
And I may even go back to Titanic in that sub, just to prove the point that if it's done right, it can be done safely.
Hello, I'm Amelia Adams. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.